The story takes place in a small village on the African continent, where class distinctions and the trampling of the wealthy have existed for generations. In this village, people live miserably under the oppression of powerful families who control the resources, the land, and the dreams of the poor. The main character is Madhu, a poor farmer who saw his parents starve to death during a terrible drought when the land was taken to serve the lavish projects of the upper class. Madhu and the poor people in the village are only allowed to work on the land that their ancestors once owned for low wages and are treated like slaves. Day after day, they have to endure contempt, insults, and violence from the rich, who live in luxurious mansions on the hilltops overlooking the village. One of the richest families is that of Hakim, a ruthless merchant who does not hesitate to use his money and power to keep the villagers under his control. Hakim, a wealthy and powerful merchant, always looked down on Madhu's family and the other poor farmers. He considered them as lowly ants under his feet, unworthy of being treated kindly. In Hakim's eyes, the poor were born only to serve and enrich him. Madhu's parents were honest farmers who worked hard on their ancestral land. But everything changed when Hakim appeared and began to take over every inch of land in the village to expand his plantation. Madhu's family, along with many others, lost their land and were forced to work for Hakim for a pittance that was barely enough to sustain them through the dry season. Madhu's father, an honest and steadfast man, fought hard to reclaim his rights. He demanded fair wages from Hakim, but in return, Hakim had the guards brutally beat him in front of Madhu, who was just a boy. The punches and kicks left him collapsed, and his health deteriorated, leaving him unable to work. Hakim did not stop there. He imposed harsh rules to ensure that no one dared to challenge his authority. The peasants, including Madhu's family, were forced to work around the clock, without rest. If anyone dared to slow down or show any signs of resistance, he ordered merciless punishment. Many times, Madhu witnessed his neighbors and friends being brutally beaten or expelled from the village for failing to complete their work under Hakim's harsh conditions. When Madhu's mother fell seriously ill from exhaustion after long days of working under the scorching sun, Hakim refused to let her rest. He ordered her to continue to work hard, knowing full well that her health could not bear it. She died just a few weeks later, a painful and unjust death, under the cold eyes of Hakim, who felt no regret. Hakim's cruelty was even more evident when he took Amina, Madhu's younger sister, to work as a servant. Just because Amina dared to stand up for her brother when Madhu demanded timely payment, Hakim took her to his mansion as a toy, a way to prove his absolute power. There, Amina was forced to work non-stop, to serve lavish parties, to see the extravagant wealth of the upper class while her own family was starving. He made her sleep on the dirty floor, ate leftovers, and constantly insulted her with harsh words, saying that she and her family were worthless people, unworthy of any respect. Hakim's cruelty destroyed Madhu's family, but it also ignited a fire of anger and determination in Madhu to fight back. Each of Hakim's cruel acts only increased Madhu's determination to fight for freedom for his family and all the oppressed poor. Madhu began to meet other peasants in the village, silently creating an underground movement. From the dark corners of the village to the deep forests, they gathered together, silently planning to regain their rights. Madhu became the leader of the uprising, determined to change the fate of those who had been oppressed for so long. Madhu understood that bare-handed resistance would not be able to deal with Hakim's guards, so he and his group began to find ways to collect weapons from various sources. They used their savings to buy knives, sticks, and crude weapons from underground merchants. They also made simple traps out of wood and stone, using their familiarity with the terrain to prepare for surprise ambushes. Madhu also taught people how to fight. Although they were farmers who had never held a weapon, they trained with iron determination. Secret training sessions were held in dense forest areas where Hakim could not monitor them. He and his comrades secretly broke into Hakim's food stores, where he had hoarded food while the villagers were starving. They distributed the food to the poor, building trust and support from the community. In addition, Madhu sabotaged Hakim's plantations and factories, where villagers were forced to work under terrible conditions. They burned the fields, disrupted production, and created chaos in the economic system that Hakim had built. These actions worried Hakim and his subordinates, forcing them to increase their defenses, but also weaken them. After careful preparation, Madhu decided the right time to launch the uprising. On a moonless night, when Hakim's guards were tired and off guard, Madhu and the other villagers attacked his mansion. They began by distracting the guards, using traps and well-rehearsed moves. In the main assault, they surrounded key areas, from the food storage to the weapons room. Madhu led his small army, determined to confront Hakim directly. Once inside, they clashed with his guards, but thanks to their unity and clever tactics, Madhu and his team quickly overwhelmed them. Finally, Madhu confronted Hakim in his private room. Hakim, who had once been complacent and looked down on people like Madhu, now looked terrified at the angry mob that had broken through all of his defenses. Madhu was no longer the weak boy he once was, but a symbol of resistance, carrying the strength of an entire oppressed community. Madhu did not choose violent revenge. Instead, he decided that Hakim would face his sins publicly. In front of the entire village, Madhu demanded that Hakim admit to the crimes he had committed. Hakim, now left with no choice, was forced to bow his head and confess that he had abused his power and exploited innocent people. This was not only to seek justice, but also to serve as a lesson to future generations about the consequences of greed and cruelty. Hakim begged for his life, but Madhu would not let him off the hook. Instead of finishing Hakim off, he decided to make him face justice in front of the entire village. Madhu forced him to see the suffering he had caused and declared that Hakim's power was over. All the properties and lands he had taken would be returned to the villagers. The oppressed people now had the right to decide their own fate. After defeating Hakim and his family, Madhu and the villagers not only took back their land but also established a new system where everyone had equal rights and were treated fairly. They established a village council where all decisions were made by consensus of the community. With the victory of the uprising, Amina, Madhu's younger sister, was finally released from captivity. She returned to her family, but she was no longer the weak girl she had been. The painful experiences had made Amina stronger, more determined to protect the vulnerable.